They thought they could erase me with a single HR memo. They thought silence in a beige conference room would bury 12 years of work, of sacrifice, of systems only I could command. But the thing about silence, when it breaks, it doesn't whisper, it detonates. And when it did, the whole company realized too late they hadn't fired a cog in the machine. They'd fired the engine. My name is Melissa Carter. And on that Tuesday morning at 10:30, I sat in conference room B, watching my career die. The walls were that particular shade of corporate beige that swallows sound and hope in equal measure. Across the polished table, Sandra from HR shuffled papers with manicured fingers while our new CFO, Brandon Hale, checked his phone like he had somewhere more important to be. "This is a restructuring decision," Sandra said, her voice rehearsed and hollow. "Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. 12 years. I'd given this company 12 years, and they'd condensed it into a 3-minute termination meeting." Brandon finally looked up, his eyes sliding over me like I was already furniture being removed. 6 weeks on the job, and he'd decided I was expendable. The man who couldn't even find the coffee machine without an escort had determined my worth. "Your severance package is standard," Sandra continued, sliding a folder across the table. 2 weeks' pay, Cobra information, and you'll need to return your badge and laptop before leaving the building. I didn't reach for the folder. Instead, I studied them both. Sandra with her practiced sympathy, Brandon with his barely concealed impatience. They saw a middle manager, a quiet woman who'd worked late shifts and early mornings without complaint. They saw someone forgettable. "Any questions?" Sandra asked, her pen poised over the termination checklist. I had 1,000 questions, like how Brandon planned to run quarterly projections without understanding the proprietary forecasting system I'd built from scratch, or who would maintain the security protocols I'd implemented after the embezzlement scandal last year. But I asked none of them. "No," I said, my voice steady as glass. Brandon stood first, already dismissing me from his mind. "HR will escort you to collect your belongings," he said, straightening his tie. "We appreciate your contributions." Contributions, as if I'd brought donuts to meetings instead of architecting the entire financial infrastructure that kept this place running. I rose slowly, smoothing my skirt, maintaining the composure they expected. No tears, no pleas, no visible cracks in the professional facade. Sandra walked me to my desk like a prison guard, hovering as I packed 12 years into a cardboard box. My colleagues avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their screens. The photo of my sister's kids went in first, then the coffee mug I'd used every morning since 2013, the small cactus that had somehow survived the fluorescent wasteland of our office. "The IT department will handle your system access," Sandra said, watching me disconnect my personal phone charger. "Everything will be deactivated by end of day." I almost smiled at that. They thought revoking my credentials would lock me out. They didn't understand that I wasn't just a user of the system, I was its architect. Every line of code, every security layer, every hidden backdoor I'd built for legitimate troubleshooting purposes. It would all still recognize me, would still respond to the ghost in the machine I'd carefully cultivated. As security walked me through the lobby, my heels clicking against marble for the last time as an employee, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. 41 years old, unremarkable in my navy suit, invisible in the way middle-aged women become invisible in corporate America. Perfect. They thought they'd ended something in that conference room. In truth, they'd started it. I stepped into the morning sun, box in my arms, and for the first time in 12 years, I felt genuinely excited about Monday morning, because by then, they'd understand exactly what they'd thrown away. The security guard took my badge at the door, and I handed it over without hesitation. I wouldn't need it anymore. I had something far better. I had the keys to the kingdom. And they didn't even know the kingdom existed. The elevator in my apartment building wheezed to the 4th floor, and I balanced the cardboard box against my hip while fumbling for keys. Inside, my one-bedroom sanctuary waited sparse, functional, nothing like the sprawling suburban homes my colleagues boasted about, but it was mine, paid for by countless overtime hours they never knew about. I set the box on my kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of wine at 2 in the afternoon. Why not? I was unemployed now. The Merlot tasted bitter. Or maybe that was just the irony coating my tongue. 12 years. And they'd never truly seen me. I'd started at Morrison Financial as a junior analyst in 2012, fresh from my divorce, desperate to rebuild. The interview panel had barely looked up from their phones, hiring me to fill a quota, another body for the cubicle farm. They never expected me to be exceptional. That was their first mistake. Within 6 months, I'd identified critical flaws in their forecasting models that were hemorrhaging money. Instead of recognition, I got a pat on the head and a 2% raise. So I fixed the problems quietly, building new systems that actually worked. When the senior analyst quit, I absorbed his responsibilities without the title or pay increase. "You're so reliable, Melissa," they'd say, as if reliability was a consolation prize for ambition. The real transformation began 3 years in, during the budget crisis of 2018. The company was bleeding money, and nobody could figure out why. I worked 18-hour days, sleeping under my desk, living on vending machine coffee and sheer determination. At 3:45 a.m. on a Sunday, I found its systematic embezzlement hidden in procurement overrides. $5 million siphoned over 2 years. Did I get the credit? The CFO at the time, Richardson, presented my findings to the board as his discovery. I sat in the back row, invisible, while he accepted praise for saving the company. That night, I went home and began building something new, a forecasting system so sophisticated, so intrinsically woven into our infrastructure, that it would become indispensable. More importantly, I built it with safeguards only I understood. Every late night, every weekend, every holiday I sacrificed, I told myself it was an investment. While my sister posted photos of family vacations, I optimized algorithms. While my college friends celebrated promotions, I created security protocols that would make our systems unhackable from the outside. At least, the inside was different. The inside was mine. The embezzlement scandal had taught me something valuable: trust no one and document everything. So I built my system with layers upon layers of biometric locks, encrypted pathways that recognized my digital fingerprint, not just my credentials. It thought they understood it, but they only saw the surface. Like looking at an ocean and thinking you comprehend what lives in the deep. My phone buzzed a text from my sister. "How was your day?" "Eventful," I replied. No point worrying her yet. The wine glass caught the afternoon sun, casting red shadows across my resignation paperwork. They'd valued me at 2 weeks severance. 2 weeks for 12 years. For the nights I'd missed my nephew's school plays to fix critical errors. For the dates I'd canceled to meet impossible deadlines. For the promotion recommendations that mysteriously disappeared every review cycle. I opened my laptop, my personal one, and pulled up the system logs I could still access through the monitoring protocols I'd established. Everything looked normal. Brandon was probably in his office right now, confident in his decision, maybe even bragging about the overhead he'd cut. Sandra had likely already posted my position online, seeking someone younger, cheaper, more pliable. They called me reliable, dependable, a good soldier, words designed to keep women like me in our place, grateful for the scraps of recognition. But I'd learned to speak a different language, the language of code, of systems, of irreplaceable knowledge, and soon, very soon, they'd learn what those pretty dismissive words had cost them. I closed the laptop and finished my wine. Tomorrow, I'd update my resume, go through the motions of job hunting, but tonight, I'd sleep well knowing that somewhere in Morrison Financial's servers, my digital DNA was embedded in every crucial process. They thought they'd fired an employee. They'd actually fired their oxygen supply. And unlike me, systems don't forgive being abandoned. The beauty of my system wasn't in its complexity, it was in its elegance. Sitting at my kitchen table at 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, I reviewed the architecture I'd memorized long ago. No notes, no documentation, everything lived in my head, exactly as I'd planned. After the embezzlement scandal, the board had demanded bulletproof security. I gave them exactly that: multi-factor authentication, biometric locks, encryption that would make the NSA jealous. But here's what they never understood: I didn't build walls to keep threats out. I built a maze where I was the only one who knew the path. The forecasting system ran on 3 levels. The surface level, what IT could see, was straightforward enough: input data, run algorithms, generate reports. The second level held the real magic predictive modeling that learned from patterns, adjusted for market volatility, and could forecast with 94% accuracy. But the third level, that was mine alone. Hidden in subroutines that appeared to be standard error-checking protocols. I'd embedded recognition sequences. Not passwords, those could be changed. Not access codes, those could be revoked. These were digital signatures woven into the core functionality. The system knew me the way a child knows its mother's voice. Every time I'd run diagnostics, every late-night optimization session, every bug fix, the system learned my rhythm, my patterns, my digital heartbeat. I hadn't built this out of malice. Initially, it was protection. After watching Richardson steal my work, I needed insurance. If they ever tried to push me out without cause, I'd have leverage. But over the years, it evolved into something more sophisticated. The system needed me not because I'd programmed it to fail without me, but because I'd programmed it to protect itself. The security protocols I'd implemented last year weren't just about keeping hackers out. They were about maintaining system integrity. Any significant change to core processes required biometric confirmation from the system architect me. It could run updates. Sure, they could modify user interfaces, add new report templates, even integrate new data sources, but touch the core. Try to alter the fundamental architecture. The system would lock them out faster than they could blink. My phone showed 7:15 a.m. In about 45 minutes, Morrison Financial's early birds would arrive. By 9, they'd all be settling in with their coffee. Confident in their routines, the quarter end was in 3 weeks. Brandon would need comprehensive projections for the board meeting. He'd log in, pull up the forecasting module, and everything would work perfectly. For now. The brilliant part was that I didn't need to do anything malicious. I didn't plant viruses or create backdoors for sabotage. I simply built a system that recognized its creator and responded accordingly. When my biometric credentials were revoked yesterday, the system noticed. It wouldn't rebel immediately, that would be too obvious. But it would start to question every request, verify every access attempt, slow down every process that didn't carry my digital signature. Think of it like a piano that's been tuned by the same technician for years. Suddenly, a new technician arrives with different techniques, different tools, different touch. The piano doesn't break, it just never sounds quite right again. Every note is slightly off, every chord a little discordant. That's what Morrison Financial was about to experience. I pulled up my banking app and reviewed my savings. 6 months of expenses, maybe 8 if I was careful. More than enough time for them to realize their mistake, because they would call, not today, not tomorrow, but soon, when the reports started showing inconsistencies, when the projections began to drift, when they realized that their bulletproof system had locked them out of their own vault. The irony was delicious. They demanded I make the system unhackable after the embezzlement. "No one should be able to manipulate our data," Richardson had said, pounding his fist on the conference table. "I want Fort Knox-level security." I'd given him exactly that, a fortress so secure that even they couldn't breach it without me. I closed my laptop and made breakfast eggs over easy, whole wheat toast, the good coffee I usually saved for weekends. No rush anymore, no emergency calls to answer, no impossible deadlines to meet, just me, my quiet apartment, and the knowledge that right now, Brandon Hale was probably strutting around my old department, proud of the money he'd saved. Let him strut, let him bask in his efficiency metrics and cost-cutting achievements. In 3 weeks, when he stood before the board with corrupted projections and access-denied messages, he'd understand the difference between price and value. They'd paid me $78,000 a year. The system I'd built generated insights worth millions. You can't put a price on irreplaceable, but they were about to learn exactly what it cost. Thursday morning, 8:47 a.m. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet, my former assistant. "Something's wrong with the reports. Brandon's losing it." I set down my coffee and opened my laptop, accessing the system logs through the external monitoring portal I'd maintained. The beauty of being thorough, I'd insisted on remote diagnostic capabilities for weekend emergencies. They'd never thought to revoke that access because they didn't know it existed. The logs told a beautiful story. Brandon had tried to generate the weekly revenue projections at 8:15. The system had requested biometric verification. He'd overridden it with his administrator credentials. The report generated, but the numbers were 3 days old. Stale data in a financial firm was like expired milk in a restaurant, useless and potentially dangerous. By 9 a.m., the whispers had started. I could picture it, perfectly, analysts huddled by the coffee machine, junior staff exchanging worried glances. The dashboard isn't updating. My forecast model keeps timing out. Anyone else getting error messages? Brandon, according to Janet's play-by-play texts, had called it. They'd restarted the servers, cleared the cache, run diagnostics, everything came back green. The system was functioning perfectly, it just wasn't cooperating. He's screaming at Tom from IT. Janet texted at 9:32. Says it's probably a bug you left behind. A bug, as if I were that sloppy. What they were experiencing wasn't a malfunction. It was the system protecting itself from unauthorized changes. Every time Brandon tried to access core functions with his surface-level permissions, the system added another layer of verification, like a child repeatedly asking why until the adult gave up in frustration. By noon, the panic had spread. I monitored the access logs as different users attempted workarounds. The senior analysts tried pulling raw data, directly access denied. Finance attempted to restore from yesterday's backup integrity check, failed. Even the IT administrator, poor Tom, couldn't penetrate the secondary security protocols. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, this time from Morrison Financial's main line. Still, I didn't answer. They weren't desperate enough yet. At 2:17 p.m., Janet texted again. Emergency meeting in the boardroom. Brandon's presenting manually calculated projections. It's a disaster. I pulled up the company's shared calendar, a perk of still having that monitoring access. The quarterly planning meeting was in 2 weeks, but they had a preliminary stakeholder review tomorrow. Without updated projections, Brandon would be walking in blind. The beautiful irony. He could have asked me for help on Tuesday, right after firing me. If he'd shown an ounce of humility, asked for a transition period, offered consulting fees for knowledge transfer, I might have helped. But he'd dismissed me like I was disposable. Now he was learning what disposal actually cost. At 3:45 p.m., an email appeared in my personal inbox, from Brandon himself. Melissa, we've encountered some technical difficulties with the forecasting system. As the previous system administrator, we'd appreciate your assistance in resolving these issues. We're prepared to offer standard consulting rates for your time. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Standard consulting rates. After 12 years, they wanted to rent my expertise at bargain prices. I archived the email without responding. The logs showed increasing desperation as the day wore on. They'd brought in external IT consultants by 4 p.m. By 5, those consultants were just as stumped. The system wasn't broken, that was the problem. It was working exactly as designed, denying access to anyone who didn't match the architect's biometric profile. My phone buzzed with another text from Janet at 6:23 p.m. Brandon just threw his laptop across the room. Security had to escort him out to cool down. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto my couch with my laptop. The system logs were better than Netflix. Every failed attempt, every access denial, every frustrated override painted a picture of corporate chaos. The quarter-end reports weren't just numbers, they were the company's lifeline to investors, stakeholders, and regulatory bodies. Without them, Morrison Financial was flying blind. Tomorrow was Friday. The stakeholder review was at 2 p.m. Brandon had less than 20 hours to either fix the system or explain to a room full of investors why their financial data was experiencing technical difficulties. In the corporate world, that was basically admitting you'd lost control of your own company. The phone rang again at 8:41 p.m. This time, it was Richard Morrison himself, the CEO. I recognized his direct line. Still, I let it ring. The voicemail was brief. Ms. Carter, we need to talk. Please call me back tonight. Need, not want, need. The word tasted like vindication. I closed my laptop and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would be even more interesting. They thought they'd hit rock bottom today, but they hadn't realized yet the system wasn't just denying them access. Starting at midnight, it would begin its monthly optimization cycle. A process that usually took 2 hours would stretch to 20 without my biometric confirmation to expedite it. Which meant tomorrow's stakeholder meeting would happen while their entire financial system was essentially frozen in maintenance mode. Sleeping had never felt so satisfying. Friday, 1:45 p.m. I sat in my favorite coffee shop 3 blocks from Morrison Financial, laptop open, watching the disaster unfold in real time. The stakeholder review was in 15 minutes, and the system was still locked in its optimization cycle exactly as I'd predicted. Janet had gone silent an hour ago, but the logs told me everything. 37 failed override attempts, 4 emergency IT consultants on site, 2 cybersecurity firms called in to check for ransomware. They were treating it like an attack when it was simply the system following its protocols, waiting for its architect's touch. At 2:03 p.m., my phone exploded with notifications. The first was from a former colleague in accounting. OMG, Brandon just crashed and burned in front of everyone. Then another, the board is furious. And another, did you see the investors walking out? I hadn't seen it, but I could imagine it perfectly. The gleaming boardroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the mahogany table surrounded by suits worth more than my annual salary, and Brandon cocky, dismissive Brandon standing at the presentation screen showing error access denied in 48-point font. At 2:18 p.m., my phone rang. Richard Morrison again. This time, I answered. Melissa. His voice was controlled, but I heard the strain underneath. I'm in the boardroom with the entire board of directors and 6 of our largest investors. We need you to fix this, now. Mr. Morrison, I replied, stirring my latte. I was terminated on Tuesday. I no longer work for Morrison Financial. I'm aware of that mistake. The word mistake came out sharp, and I heard Brandon's muffled protest in the background. We need you to come in immediately. We'll discuss compensation. I'm no longer in the city, I lied smoothly. Even if I were inclined to help, I couldn't possibly make it there today. Silence. Then, can you fix it remotely? The system requires biometric authentication from the architect. That's the security protocol your team demanded after the embezzlement scandal. I specifically remember Mr. Hale praising the unhackable nature of the design during his first week. More muffled conversation. I caught fragments. How did we not know? Due diligence. Unacceptable. Richard came back on. What do you want, Melissa? Right now I want to finish my coffee. This is costing us millions. Then maybe you should have thought about that before deciding I was expendable. I kept my voice pleasant, professional. If you'll excuse me, I have a job interview to prepare for. I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. I declined the call, then another, and another. I put it on silent and returned to my logs. At 2:35 p.m., something beautiful happened. The system finally completed its optimization cycle, but instead of returning to normal operation, it triggered a new security protocol. Someone, probably Tom from IT in desperation, had attempted to force modify the core architecture during the maintenance window. The system interpreted this as an attack. Every screen at Morrison Financial would now be displaying the same message. Security breach detected, architect authentication required, system lockdown in effect. Below that, in smaller text that I'd added after Richardson's betrayal, System Architect M. Carter, authorization level exclusive. My phone lit up with 53 messages in 2 minutes. Texts, emails, voicemails, even a LinkedIn message from someone in HR. The coffee shop's window faced Morrison Financial's tower, and I watched as people started streaming out of the building. Not an evacuation, more like rats fleeing a sinking ship. At 3:07 p.m., a new message came through, this time from an unknown number. Ms. Carter, this is David Sterling from the Board of Directors. We've just terminated Brandon Hale. Please contact me immediately to discuss your reinstatement. Terminated Brandon. It had taken them exactly 3 days to realize what he'd cost them. But reinstatement. As if I was a library book, they could simply check back out. I opened a new email and typed carefully. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate your message. However, reinstatement implies returning to my previous position and conditions. That role no longer interests me. If Morrison Financial wishes to discuss a new arrangement, I'm willing to listen. My consulting rate is $1,500 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 40 hours. This would cover system recovery only, not ongoing maintenance or knowledge transfer. Alternatively, We could discuss a chief technology architect position reporting directly to the CEO, with compensation commensurate with the critical nature of the role. You have my number? M. Carter. I hit send and closed my laptop. The coffee shop was getting crowded with Morrison Financial employees who'd left early, their voices a mix of confusion and panic. None of them recognized me in my casual Friday jeans and sweater, invisible again in the best possible way. 3:22 p.m. Richard Morrison called again. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Your terms, he asked without preamble. I sent them to David Sterling. The board is reviewing them now. A pause. Melissa, you built a kill switch into our system. No, I corrected. I built a security system that recognizes its creator. You killed the switch when you fired me. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, the board will call you within the hour. They called in 37 minutes. By 4 p.m., I had a new title, a salary that tripled my previous one, and a direct report to the CEO. But I didn't go in that day. I made them wait through the weekend, letting the full weight of their dependence sink in. Monday morning would be soon enough to show them what resurrection looked like. The weekend was torture for them. I knew because the calls never stopped. Richard Morrison at 9 a.m. Saturday, David Sterling at noon, Tom from IT at 3:47 p.m., almost crying. Even Sandra from HR, who'd walked me out like a criminal, left a stammering voicemail at 11 p.m. Saturday night. I answered none of them. The system remained locked, a $20 billion company frozen in digital amber. I monitored the logs from my couch, watching their increasingly frantic attempts. They'd brought in specialists from Seattle, consultants from New York, even a systems architect from their London branch. Each one failed at the same wall architect authentication required. Sunday afternoon, the news broke. Morrison Financial faces technical crisis. Read the Wall Street Journal alert on my phone. The article speculated about cyber attacks, ransomware, even corporate sabotage. Their stock futures were already trending down in Asian markets. At 6 p.m. Sunday, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Richard Morrison himself, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Melissa. He looked exhausted, his usual CEO polish worn down to raw desperation. The board has accepted all your terms. The contract is ready. We need you to come in now. Tomorrow morning, I said calmly. 9 a.m. We're hemorrhaging money every hour. Then you should have thought about that before Brandon Hale decided I was expendable. I started to close the door. Wait. He pulled out an envelope. Your signing bonus, $200,000. The board wanted you to know we're serious. I took the envelope without looking inside. 9 a.m. Richard, not 8:59, not 9:01, exactly 9. He nodded and left, his shoulders sagging with defeat. That night, I slept better than I had in 12 years, not because of the money or the vindication, but because finally they understood my value, not as the quiet woman who fixed problems in the shadows, but as the architect who held their digital world in her hands. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m. I stood across the street from Morrison Financial, watching employees stream in. Some looked nervous, others exhausted. Everyone moved with the tense urgency of people whose careers hung by a thread. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked through the lobby. Security had my new executive badge ready, gold-trimmed with full access. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt different this time. Not the walk of shame from last Tuesday, but a victory march. The entire board was waiting in the main conference room. Richard stood when I entered, followed by the others, a sign of respect I'd never received before. Brandon Hale's empty chair sat like a gap tooth in their perfect corporate smile. Melissa, David Sterling began, we need to understand how extensive this architecture is. I set my laptop on the table, taking my time. Every financial model, every forecast algorithm, every security protocol, they all run through the core system I designed. It's not extensive, it's everything. And you're the only one who can access it, another board member asked. I'm the only one it trusts, I corrected. There's a difference. This is unacceptable, someone muttered. One person shouldn't have this much control. You're right, I interrupted. which is why my first action as Chief Technology Architect will be to design a transition plan. We'll build redundancies, train a team, document everything properly, but that takes time and trust, both things that were in short supply last Tuesday. Richard cleared his throat. How quickly can you restore normal operations? I opened my laptop, connected to the main display. Watch. I placed my hand on the biometric scanner, typed a series of commands, and spoke a verbal passphrase I'd never documented anywhere. The system responded like a pet recognizing its owner after a long absence. Green lights cascaded across the status board. Financial models hummed back to life. Data flowed like water breaking through a dam. Full restoration in approximately 12 minutes, I announced. The relief in the room was palpable. Several board members actually applauded, but I wasn't done. There's something else you need to know, I said, pulling up the activity logs from the past 5 days. During the lockdown, 3 external IP addresses attempted to breach our systems. They were specifically targeting the vulnerability created by the chaos. The room went silent. The security protocols held, I continued. But if someone less careful had built your systems, if Brandon's cost-cutting had included reducing our security infrastructure, you wouldn't just be looking at frozen systems. You'd be looking at empty accounts. Richard's face went pale. Are you saying the lockdown actually protected us? I'm saying, I replied, meeting each of their eyes in turn, that you don't know what you don't know, and firing the person who does know is the most expensive mistake you can make. The board exchanged glances. Finally, David Sterling spoke. We owe you an apology. Melissa. I don't need apologies, I said, standing. I need respect, and the resources to do my job properly. As the systems came fully online at 9:13 a.m., notification sounds filled the room, emails flowing, reports generating, the entire machinery of Morrison Financial breathing again. But now they knew the truth. I wasn't just running the machine. I was the machine. The call came at 7:30 p.m. Monday, after I'd spent the day stabilizing systems and reviewing the damage. Richard's voice was different now, respectful, almost fearful. Melissa, can you join me in my office? There's something we need to discuss privately. I found him standing by his window, the city lights stretching below us, the corporate king surveying his kingdom, except now he knew someone else held the keys. The board has some concerns, he began carefully, about the leverage you have. You mean the fact that I could lock you out again? I said bluntly. He turned to face me. Yes. Richard, let me be very clear. I didn't build this system to hold you hostage. I built it to protect the company. The fact that it recognizes me isn't a threat. It's a feature. One that just saved you from potential hackers during your vulnerable period. But going forward, we do this right. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Here's my proposal. 6-month transition plan. We'll build a proper team, create multiple authentication layers, establish a genuine knowledge transfer protocol, but I need complete autonomy to do it. No interference from cost-cutting CFOs or board members who think it is just expensive overhead. He reviewed the proposal, his CEO mask slipping enough to show genuine surprise. This is comprehensive. Did you expect otherwise? Honestly, part of me wondered if you'd use this position to punish us. I laughed, short and sharp. Richard, watching Brandon escorted from the building was punishment enough. What I want is to build something lasting, something that survives beyond any one person, including me. The compensation you've outlined for your team is what it actually costs to hire people who understand systems at this level. You've been underpaying technical talent for years, then acting surprised when things break. He nodded slowly. The board won't like the budget. The board didn't like being locked out of their own company either. Which would they prefer? His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. Brandon's threatening to sue. Says we scapegoated him for your sabotage. Sabotage. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a saved email. You mean like when he sent this message to Sandra from HR last Monday, saying he planned to clean house of expensive legacy employees who think they're irreplaceable, or this one where he bragged about cutting 20% from the tech budget before the quarter ended? Richard's eyes widened. How do you have those? System administrators see everything. Richard, We just usually have the courtesy not to look, but when someone targets us specifically, I shrugged. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. Can you forward those to legal? Already did, an hour ago. He sat down heavily in his chair. You really do think of everything. No, I corrected. I just learned to protect myself. 12 years of being overlooked teaches you to document everything and trust no one. Is that why you built the authentication protocol's trust issues? I considered the question. After Richardson stole credit for finding the embezzlement, I realized something. This company rewards appearances over substance. People like Brandon, who talk a good game, get promoted. People like me, who actually keep things running, get forgotten. So I made myself unforgettable. You made yourself irreplaceable. I made myself visible, I corrected. For the first time in 12 years, you see me, not as helpful Melissa who stays late, but as the architect of your entire financial infrastructure. Richard leaned back, studying me. What would you have done if we hadn't called you back? Started my own consulting firm. Your competitors would have paid handsomely for someone who understands systems at this level. But you wouldn't have shared our proprietary information. I gave him a look that could have frozen his expensive whiskey. I'm not Brandon. Richard, I have integrity. I would have built them something better. That landed like a punch. He stood, walked to his cabinet, and poured 2 glasses of that expensive whiskey. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. They want to hear your full transition plan. They'll get it, along with my analysis of our current vulnerabilities and a 5-year roadmap for technological advancement. He handed me a glass. You've been planning this for a while. I've been ready for this for years. You just finally gave me the authority to implement it. We drank in silence, the weight of shifted power hanging between us. Finally, he asked, do you regret how it happened? Do you regret firing me? Every minute since Tuesday. Then no, I said, setting down my empty glass. I don't regret a thing. Sometimes systems need a hard reset to function properly. Consider this ours. I left him there, staring out at his kingdom, knowing that tomorrow I'd stand before the board not as a supplicant but as an equal. They needed me more than I needed them, and everyone knew it. The best part. This was just the beginning. Tomorrow, I'd show them what I could really build when given the resources and respect I deserved. They thought they were getting their old system back. They were getting a revolution. Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I walked into the boardroom wearing a new suit, not the invisible navy I'd worn for 12 years, but a sharp charcoal gray that meant business. Every board member was present, including 2 who'd flown in from Tokyo overnight. The gravity of the situation had finally sunk in. I didn't wait for introductions. I connected my laptop and launched into my presentation 40 slides of brutal honesty about Morrison Financial's technological infrastructure. Where we were failing, where we were vulnerable, where we were bleeding money through inefficiency. Brandon Hale's first action was to cancel 3 critical security updates to save $40,000, I said, clicking through the data. Those updates would have prevented the breach attempt during our lockdown. We got lucky. Lucky isn't a business strategy. David Sterling interrupted. How much will your proposed changes cost? $8 million over 2 years, I said without hesitation. Which sounds like a lot until you consider we lost $12 million in 3 days of downtime. The CFO. Brandon's replacement, a sharp woman named Teresa Wu, raised her hand. Your team structure seems excessive. 24 people. Tesla has 50 engineers just for their battery management system. We're managing the financial data of a $20 billion company with 3 overworked IT staff and whatever contractors we can scrape together. Excessive. We're running on fumes. Richard spoke up. The board has already approved the budget. Teresa? She nodded, making notes. Unlike Brandon, she actually listened. I continued through the transition plan, the knowledge transfer protocols, the redundancy systems, but then I showed them something they weren't expecting: the innovation pipeline. This isn't just about fixing what's broken, I explained. It's about building what's next. Predictive AI that can forecast market shifts 3 months out. Blockchain integration for transparent transactions. Quantum-resistant encryption before quantum computing makes current security obsolete. An older board member, Harrison, leaned forward. You're talking about putting us ahead of the curve. I'm talking about defining the curve, I corrected. But it requires trust, and investment, and the understanding that the people who build your future are just as valuable as the ones who manage your money. Silence filled the room. Then Harrison asked the question I'd been waiting for. What happens if you leave? Or if something happens to you, we can't be in this position again. I clicked to my final slide. That's why the first phase focuses on documentation and training. Every system, every protocol, every line of code will be understood by at least 3 people, but more importantly, we're building a culture where technical talent is valued, not dismissed, where the next Melissa Carter isn't ignored for 12 years. And if we slip back into old habits, David asked. I smiled, the same cold smile I'd worn walking out last Tuesday. Then you'll deserve whatever happens next. The vote was unanimous, full approval, full budget, full autonomy. As the board members filed out, each shook my hand, a gesture of respect I'd never received before. Sandra from HR lingered, looking uncomfortable. Melissa, I need to apologize. The way I handled your termination. You were following orders, I said. But next time someone tells you to escort out a 12-year employee like a criminal, maybe ask why. She nodded, shamefaced, and left. Richard stayed behind, watching me pack up my laptop. You know, Brandon's already got another job. CFO at Pinnacle Industries. Good for him, I said, and meant it. He'll fit right in with their surface-level thinking. They're our biggest competitor. I looked up, meeting his eyes. Not for long, not once we implement what I showed you today. You really believe that? Richard, I spent 12 years in the basement of this company, watching how things really work. Not the PowerPoint version, but the actual machinery. I know where every inefficiency hides, where every opportunity waits. You gave me the power to act on that knowledge. Pinnacle won't know what hit them. He extended his hand. Then let's build the future, Chief Architect Carter. I shook it, firm and professional, but as I walked to my new office corner suite, 20th floor, the one Brandon had his eye on, I allowed myself one moment of pure satisfaction. They'd thought they were firing an expendable employee. Instead, they'd activated their secret weapon, and now, with full authority and resources, I was going to transform Morrison Financial into something magnificent, not out of revenge, but out of pride. My pride, finally visible, finally valued, finally in charge. I settled into my new chair, looking out at the city below, and opened my laptop. Time to get to work. Real work, the kind that changes everything. Brandon's old nameplate was still on the desk, forgotten in his hasty exit. I dropped it in the trash and pulled out my new one. Melissa Carter, Chief Technology Architect. Below that, in smaller letters, I'd added myself System Essential. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that your enemies become footnotes in your story, and my story. It was just beginning. I typed my first email from the new position, addressing the entire technology team. Meeting at 2 p.m., we're going to change the world. Shall we begin? Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and vindication. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed Melissa's journey from invisible employee to irreplaceable architect, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever felt undervalued at work? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. Your stories inspire mine.